Okay, I'm here with Deebs. Deebs is coming at us from New Frontier. And how are you doing today, Deebs?
I'm well. How are you today, man?
I'm pretty good. Well, before we get into kind of New Frontier, can you tell us a little bit about how you kind of evolved politically and philosophically, and kind of how you got to where you are now?
Sure. So where I'm at now is, I guess we call it third position, or I'm a third positionist or whatever. But I suppose I first got into politics and all that jazz at like 15 years old. And it wasn't really anything remarkable. I think it's the same story that most maybe Generation Z people go through, where basically you go online, you see a Ben Shapiro video, you think it's the hottest shit in the world, and then you just kind of go down a rabbit hole. Basically, I kind of just started off going down this rabbit hole of, that led me to self-identifying as a right-winger at the time. And basically just kind of consuming this crap led me to being, I guess you could call it a libertarian. And one thought that I have now is I could at least understand why there are libertarians. And it's, I think, a pretty common response to, I suppose, being dissatisfied with how the way things are. But over time, and this is just kind of fast forwarding the boring story, over time I've kind of come to this sort of frame of mind that authority is necessary, and that there really is no scenario where I'm not quite sure if there was ever a time when small government or libertarianism was possible, but I don't think that's possible now or in the foreseeable future. Let's see.
I agree.
Yeah, and you know, not to take 20 years, but I know that, again, when I was in high school, going down the American version of what is the right-wing pipeline, you know, oh, I'm all about free market capitalism and all that jazz, socialism is evil. Now, does that mean that at the time I was able to actually properly explain what the other side was about? Probably not. But in time, I did learn that there were alternatives to, well, capitalism and this sort of left-wing interpretation of socialism. And, well, whatever. I learned more. Again, fast-forwarding a bit. Now here I am. So.
Well, let's talk about that. Let's talk about New Frontier. The first thing, I stumbled onto their program at one point, and I was pretty impressed about how kind of detailed and practical it was. You know, it wasn't kind of like necessary. I mean, it's very visionary in one way, but it's not necessarily kind of pie in the sky, super radical, like abstract vision sort of thing.
Sure.
So can you, I mean, and it's a very long program, so I'll probably link that in the description, but can you kind of pick out some of the things in the program that maybe you especially resonate with or that you think are important to highlight?
Sure. Let me see. Off the top of my head, the first thing is, again, there's so much on the platform that is, it would be amazing if we could accomplish any of it. Basically, a lot of it is stuff that just doesn't happen in the U.S., not unless we actually change things. So when I say, you know, this next thing, I don't expect it to ever happen overnight, but still, what I loved about the platform was that it had like nationalization of, public utilities, like banking, for example. I think that is certainly an issue with privatized banking. I think it's given us a number of problems. I appreciated that. Let me see. I don't remember everything off the top of my head. I love the vice tax idea that they had on basically adding taxation onto, I guess, well, just as an example, cigarettes, soda, or whatever. And basically people who are, there's an extreme way to put it, but people who are poisoning themselves to a degree. When they buy these things, they're also funding their, what do you call it? I don't know, their rehabilitation, if they're buying cigarettes or whatever, or alcohol. I just kind of like how that's, just works out. I admired the part of the platform that focuses on, giving a crap about the environment. But for the most part, I think the sort of economic section is what was interesting to me. And again, it's rather pragmatic.
Yeah, it's a very kind of populist, but also very visionary in many ways program. The thing I noticed was the kind of physical fitness, the kind of
Mhm.
civic nationalism that promoted, not just kind of in a vague way, oh, we'll promote civic nationalism. No, we'll do this. We'll have these programs. So I thought that was really interesting. And in terms of what I mean, how would you describe third positionism? Because it's a word that you don't normally hear in political discourse, and it's not necessarily a term that I use a whole lot. But I'd like to hear your take on it.
Sure. So the I don't remember who the hell coined the term third position, but basically the idea is that it's people who call themselves third positionists claim that there are two before it, right? So what are the first two? These guys will say that the first one is liberal democracy or capitalism, the second one being Marxism or communism, and the third position is essentially the middle ground or the ethereal space in between the two. Now,
Good way to put it.
yeah. I mean, I have heard it called, or I've heard people call it right-wing socialism, which is a phrase that I understand what they mean, and honestly, there is some kind of truth in the label. At the same time, I think that third position in general, if I just had to put it, or if I had to explain it in like a left-right paradigm terms, I would say it's economically left-wing and culturally right-wing. So on the cultural side of things, what do you call it? Agreeing with traditional family values or something remotely close to that, probably as close as possible. The rejection of things like, well, things that are essentially against nature. One might say homosexuality. I kind of draw the line right after it. I kind of let that one go. But as people who are third position certainly don't get behind things like transgenderism, for example, or other things
No socialized transition, bottom surgeries.
well, so far I can't really see any crossover between accepting that and third position. But
Okay.
I'm always open. I'm always open to whatever. Maybe I'm wrong, but so far I can't quite see much. And economic leftism. I mean, that's just, well, that works with the presupposition that socialism is inherently left wing, and if it is, then it's economically socialist. But to me, it looks like it's left wing economics serving right wing cultural values.
Interesting. And well, I always found that interesting because it seems like any sort of Marxist revolution that survives any period of time, that's where they always end up anyways, right? It always ends up something of a mixed economy, generally kind of corrupt. But the culture itself isn't particularly left-wing compared to the West. If you look at China or, other countries with a one-party kind of communist party state, they usually have kind of like a mixed economy or even a market economy. One political party, they save a bunch of money on kind of bullshit kayfabe presidential elections, so you don't get that. But then otherwise, they, they kind of promote that right wing cultural nationalism in a degree within the paradigm of a somewhat mixed economy, usually focusing on kind of social welfare, things of that nature. So I always found that interesting. Like these kind of Western Marxists talk a lot about left-wing cultural values, but the reality is throughout history, any Marxist revolution that's again survived any significant period of time, they always end up as right-wing compared to them.
Oh yeah, it's kind of ironic. I mean, let me see. There are a handful of Marxists in history or whatever who did pretty much adhere to the I don't know if you want to call it the doctrine of Marx or whatever, but I mean, just for example, I know Joseph Stalin, and that's not a guy that I like. But the thing is that, okay, so you have a bunch of guys starting up a government. Okay, we're going to be Marxists, and then they get to actually figuring out how to run the country, and then there's somebody somewhere in that group or political party who realizes, yeah, this isn't practical. So I know that Stalin did basically I was writing a paper on this. I basically found out that the sort of the economy or even the lifestyle of Italy under Mussolini and the USSR under Stalin were practically identical with one exception. And the one exception was the one thing that Stalin kept over, which was the negation of class collaboration. And I suppose that's one thing about third position that's kind of important that I forgot to mention. It seeks to achieve a certain type of socialism through something called, well, corporatism. Well, most of the time, there's some exceptions, but basically with that, it's the belief that it's important to maintain class distinctions. So whatever we call the middle class and the upper class, but also not letting one screw the other over.
That's very interesting. So that's what I was actually going to ask that next, is what is kind of the difference between third positionism and either what we might call like paleo or Orthodox Marxism and maybe SJW or culturally left Marxism. So going to that first one, if you could, so you kind of mentioned that the maintenance of class structure, and I think that's an important point too. A lot of my politics is based around this notion that equality is kind of a vice.
Yeah. So
hold on.
Oh, sure.
I'm gonna edit out that siren, so that's why I stopped talking.
Yeah, sure.
The ethereal ambient city noises. Okay, so
Sure.
So a lot of my politics is kind of based around this notion that equality is kind of a public vice, and that reality distinction is what we think of when we think of great societies. So if you think about it, like, Rome was a very complex society compared to the Germanic tribes that they were conquering. They had much more class distinction, much more layers of society. And so that's what we kind of know as a complex, thriving society, as one with a lot of distinctions. So I see that as a good thing as well. But I'll let you add a little bit more to that. And what do you think is some more of the differences between third positionism and Marxism?
Sure. So if I'm just going to flat out explain Marxism, and this is just quote unquote Marxism or communism according to Marx and Engels' Communist Manifesto. Basically what they wanted to do was bring in their interpretation of socialism. Now, my understanding of socialism across the board, there are different types of it, but general socialism is essentially state control of the economy. But the thing about Marx and Engels is that they wanted to have state control of the economy under a rather authoritarian state that would be temporary. Basically state socialism as a step to communism. And communism, the final stage of the sort of, I guess, the Marxist plan, was essentially the organized anarchy. Like that is total communism. Now, it's never freaking happened. But that's basically been part of the plan. What else? I'm remembering something on this one page. The working men have no country. You can't take away from them what they do not have. So Marx and Engels, they were anti-nationalists. They wanted to basically while eliminating the state, they wanted to eliminate the borders. And well, I don't know what their plan was for the neighboring countries, but it sounds like they wanted this quote-unquote world revolution, where basically no more nation, no more states, and just eliminate that under the guise of uniting the working men and women of the world. But that, of course, that doesn't really happen in these communist countries. I know that because Stalin was doing so much of the opposite with pro-nationalism and reintroducing traditional family values, which is something Stalin did, and that wasn't something Marx wanted. I know that in response, Trotsky, he wrote a book called The Revolution Betrayed or something. Is basically the path of the USSR is not becoming Marxist. Like, I know that the American, and this is, Stalin, The Enduring Legacy by Carrie Bolton, and he's got citations talking about how during the mid-20th century, the American right wing did think that the USSR was transcending Marxism to a degree, or at least a part of the right wing. I know that the fascist Francis Parker Yockey, he thought that was the case. So again, you got people looking at the USSR and it's just not being Marxist. But now everybody listening to this, they know what I guess Orthodox Marxism is. So what's the opposite, or what's the contrast between Orthodox Marxism and third position? Well, let's see. I would say that the third position is still socialist, but it doesn't want to eliminate the state eventually. Rather, the state is, I guess, part of the end goal. So it's not state socialism as a step to the organized anarchy that is communism, but it's just state socialism, period. But again, there's another difference, and it's third position wants that class collaboration, that maintaining of class distinctions, whereas Marxist socialism wants to eliminate class altogether and bring everybody into what we call the middle class. But then it's not in the middle of anything. It's just what it is. So that's really the difference there, if I had to sum it up real fast. And there's other factors too, but I think that's the big stuff. So.
And then let's look at it the other way. So what's the difference between third positionism and, say, kind of like conservatism?
Sure. So in the United States specifically, the word conservatism has a very specific set of connotations or meaning to it. Mm-hmm. What do conservatives in the U.S. want to conserve now? Basically, you listen to the top conservative figureheads. So let's just name a few: Ben Shapiro, Steven Crowder, maybe Dinesh D'Souza, the sort of Turning Point USA folks. They're all big on capitalism, and they're all big on, I suppose, on cultural matters. They are technically somewhat in favor of traditional family values and having a culture and so forth. But that's not necessarily what conservatism has been outside of the United States, or at least I thought that was the case. I was, a Handbook for Right-Wing Youth by Julie Savala, which is a collection of essays, and one of the essays this guy writes is from the 1970s. He writes something like, I think the essay was called "What It Means to Belong to the Right," and the quote was, there is an economic right which is based on capitalism, which has some degree of legitimacy as long as it doesn't abuse its power. But the thing about capitalism is that it's somewhat liberalistic, because liberalism focuses of liberalism originating from France. So you got the situation where conservatism on the economic side of things wants to conserve liberalism, which is almost a paradox unless we're able to it stops becoming a paradox if we can realize that liberalism can be on the right wing as well, which means that liberalism is in fact this sort of spectrum that could be, going from left or to the right, where as long it doesn't really care about what the cultural values are, as long as its economics doesn't change. But still, that this is something that is, it didn't occur to me, or I didn't quite understand when I used to call myself a conservative years ago, that I was essentially conserving economic liberalism. But let's see, you asked me something, and I'm not even sure if I answered it properly.
Interesting. That notion of kind of conservatism conserving liberalism, I thought that was really interesting. I never heard that before. So that was an interesting insight. Well, I kind of wanted to take it a little bit back to New Frontier, and I kind of wanted to ask you what they're trying to do or what they're building. What's kind of their end goal? What are their sort of projects? What are they about?
Sure. So the main goal is to raise money for political campaigns. There are a handful of guys who are planning to run. I know CT, or Cultured Thug, he's openly said he wants to run. Angelo and John Gage, he wants to run. And there are a few others as well. But basically everything that we do with the New Frontier YouTube channel, with the live streams, with the selling of books that we're doing, all the money that we make from donations, the book sales, everything is going to what we, I guess you call it a war chest when we're saving up for donations. That's the main goal, or at least that's the main priority. But the goal down the line is to actually gain traction in the mainstream, and if not, actually get any of our guys elected into state offices, then at the very least make these ideas known to the public, so that maybe down the line something happens. So I think that's really the main goal. Now, if it turns out to be better than that, then that's great. Then we gotta prepare for that and manage it when we get there. But so far, right now, it's just get ready to save for campaigns.
And that's actually a very kind of old left-wing strategy, is to kind of use elections as platforms to spread a message.
Right.
So that's interesting. You guys are doing that, and you guys are going to try to run for state office or municipal, city, president.
So at this point in time,
God, Emperor God.
Yeah,
I would go straight for global dictator, intergalactic dictator.
Yeah, that's the way to do it. Right now, the plan is, I don't remember specifically which guys, basically House or Senate. I don't remember which one CT is doing, but out of everybody who's spoken in the group, who has said that they're going to run,
Interesting.
They're going for House or Senate, and we'll see how. We'll see how that goes. I think that's going to require a little bit of planning, because I could totally foresee a scenario where we get blacklisted. But that's where we're at so far. And
I think that's where optics and strategy comes in. I think kind of probably choosing the election that you want to run in probably helps. Like, find the weak incumbent.
Sure.
Find somebody that's already pissed off. I often, I just put out a video that was 7 easy ways to help the left, and I tell people start even smaller. I'm like, run for school board, run for your county board, city board, anything. Get a bureaucratic job. Kind of weasel your way into the institutions, just like the left has. It obviously worked for them, so I think it will kind of work for us as well if we actually applied ourselves. So I find it interesting that you guys are applying that strategy, and I think that's pretty unique among kind of dissident groups, is that you're actually trying to not just run for office, but to use that as a platform itself to spread your message, which I think is a very important distinction. Because you gotta ask that question: to what end? Why are you doing something? Is it So it's nice to see that you guys are putting a little bit of forethought. You have kind of a little bit of a larger strategy going on there. Cool. Well, the next question I want to ask you. Actually, let's move on to the canceled round. So the canceled round is me asking you random questions, and then in 5 to 10 years' time, you get canceled for one of them. Okay.
Awesome. I'm ready.
Are you ready? First one. Who let the dogs out?
Oh, Jesus. I don't know. I know the song, but I don't know how to answer that.
All right. Did OJ do it?
Yeah, I think he probably did. Yeah.
What do you think? Do you think it was like? I think if he did, that's kind of cool that he got away with it in a way.
Yeah.
He's just like, whatever, I'm rich enough that I can get away. But he still ended up, that he still went after him, and now he's a crazy man getting locked up for stealing his own trophies.
Yeah.
Next one is smooth or crunchy peanut butter?
Smooth. I can't even understand. I didn't even know crunchy peanut butter was a thing.
Oh man. Okay, we found a point of contention there. Okay. One of us is getting canceled in 5 to 10 years. I don't know what it's going to be yet. We'll see which way the culture goes.
Sure.
Last one. Is Hitler still alive in Antarctica, or possibly in an outer orbit space station? And if possible, do you know how to contact him? I have something very important to tell him.
No, yeah, he's actually in the next room. He stayed over. Yeah, he stayed over.
All right. In this, what kind of projects are you working on, or what sort of things are you engaging with? What's kind of driving you forward at the moment?
Well, let's see. So I'll break it up like this: New Frontier related and not New Frontier related. New Frontier related, I'm working on. Well, myself and a couple other guys were working on some original writing material, because so far we're just publishing books that are essentially in the public domain. But right now we're in the process. We are now in the process of writing original crap. So that's one thing. There's also it's probably fine if I say this, but a magazine in the works, like what do you call it? Like a quarterly magazine, just to kind of test that out. Again, another source of revenue for the war chest. that that's a little bit down the line, but it's just kind of starting in the works now. So that's another thing. Other than that, outside of New Frontier, I mean, I go to college. I just took an English class doing a lot of writing. I just wrote a 20-page thing on why I think politics is a form of warfare. Actually, one thing, I mean, whether if it's New Frontier or not, just in general, I think my favorite thing is just writing and just going crazy with it. It's probably something that kind of brings me forward, just something to look forward to. So, yeah.
You can get into a flow state while writing.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
What a fun experience if you get into it. And so, out of curiosity, what do you study? What's your major? If you don't mind.
Sure. So my major right now is political science. It was right. I don't know if that's going to do anything for me, but we'll see what happens.
No, it's not.
Yeah,
it's definitely. You're probably a side teacher if you want.
Yeah. But I'm doing it because it's fun, and we'll see what happens after the fact. Before it was writing, now it's political science. I switched it over, but yeah, that's what I'm studying right now. So.
Well, I mean, I often tell people if they don't know what to do after high school, and if you do enjoy reading, writing, that sort of thing, definitely go to school and take that opportunity, right? Those classes you have to take where they're forcing you to read books, forcing you to write papers, and see if you can write things that you can later tweak a little bit and publish on a blog or a website or something of that nature. Just make sure to publish it after you submit it to your teacher, because sometimes they'll Google search it, find it. That happened to me one time about 10 years ago. It's not fun. Yeah. So don't do that, but wait till after you submit it to your teacher and then put it on a blog under a pen name, preferably.
Gotcha.
So cool, man. And before we wrap this up, where can people find you? Where can they find New Frontier? What are some of the platforms you guys are on?
Sure. So newfrontierusa.org. Basically, you could go there. I mean, that's where all the articles are. How even other links to our other platforms that we're on can be found from that website somehow. But I'm pretty sure we have a Gab. Literally, just type in New Frontier USA in one word. We're also on Telegram. I think the big two are just the website and the YouTube. YouTube, type in New Frontier. Hit enter. Should be like number 3 on that list of suggestions. Somehow we're not completely shadow banned yet. And then from there, I think actually on the YouTube, under the About section, we have like the link to our Telegram and other crap too. So yeah, you can find us around.
Nice. All right, man. Well, thank you very much. And is there anything else you want to tell the Will to Power audience before you go?
I don't know. Just look at the platform, see what you think about it. That's it. Share it around. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, I would definitely encourage people to do that. It is a very interesting platform. That was definitely the first thing I noticed about New Frontier. One of the reasons I wanted to bring you on to talk about it.
Sure.
Cool, man. Thank you very much.
All right. Thanks, man. Thanks for having me on.